The chamber was vast, a circular room that floated in the darkness of space like a jewel. Through the transparent dome overhead, the stars looked down on the assembled delegates of the Galactic Council. Hundreds of beings from dozens of worlds sat in their designated sections, their forms as varied as the planets they came from. Some breathed oxygen, others methane. Some had scales, others had fur, and a few existed as patterns of light contained in specialized suits. Ambassador Elena Voss stood at the speaker's platform in the center of the chamber. She was a small figure compared to many of the delegates around her. Humans always were. They had only been members of the galactic community for 63 years, barely a heartbeat in the long history of the Council. Most species here had been traveling between stars when humanity was still painting on cave walls. Elena's hands gripped the edges of the platform. Her knuckles were white. She had been speaking for 20 minutes, and she could feel the weight of dismissive stares pressing down on her from every direction. 8 expeditions, she said, her voice steady despite the anger burning in her chest. 8 separate missions sent to investigate the disappearances in the Theta Serpentis sector. 8 times our ships have entered that region of space and never returned. No distress signals, no debris fields, no survivors, nothing. A low rumble of conversation rippled through the chamber. The translator implant behind Elena's ear converted the various sounds into something her brain could process. Most of it was variations on the same theme: annoyance, impatience, dismissal. The Vraxian delegate rose from his seat. Vraxians were large beings, standing nearly 3 meters tall with 4 arms and skin that looked like polished stone. This one was named Korthax, and he had been on the council for 70 years. He looked at Elena the way someone might look at a child throwing a tantrum in a store. "Ambassador Voss," Korthax said, his voice deep and resonant. "The council has already reviewed your concerns. Multiple times. The Theta Serpentis sector is known for spatial anomalies, unstable gravity wells, unexpected radiation bursts, regions where normal space becomes unpredictable. These are the risks of exploration. Every species that ventures into the unknown faces such dangers. These aren't anomalies," Elena shot back. "We've analyzed the region extensively. We've sent probes, unmanned drones, remote sensing equipment. None of it shows the kind of spatial instability that could account for the complete disappearance of 8 fully crewed expeditions. We're talking about over 30,000 people, Counselor. 30,000 human lives gone without a trace." A delegate from the Thessian collective, a species that resembled enormous caterpillars with dozens of manipulator limbs, made a gesture that Elena's translator interpreted as a sigh. Every species experiences losses during their expansion phase. The Thessians lost 17 colony ships to various dangers before we learned to properly navigate deep space. The Karathi lost entire fleets. This is the price of reaching beyond your homeworld. "We're not asking you to prevent all losses," Elena said. Her voice was rising now, and she fought to keep it under control. Professional, diplomatic. That was what Earth needed from her. "We're asking you to acknowledge that something specific is happening in that sector. Something that needs investigation. We've requested council support, council resources, council expertise. All we get are platitudes and dismissals." Korthax settled back into his seat. The gesture was casual, unconcerned. "What you're asking for is a commitment of significant council military and scientific resources to investigate what is, in all likelihood, a series of unfortunate accidents. The council has responsibilities to hundreds of member species across thousands of systems. We cannot divert our attention and resources every time a young species experiences growing pains." The words hit Elena like a physical blow. Growing pains. As if the deaths of 30,000 people were just part of growing up as a spacefaring civilization. She took a deep breath. This was the moment she had been building toward. The moment Earth's leadership had authorized, though they hoped it wouldn't be necessary. "Then I am here to deliver an ultimatum from the United Earth government," Elena said. The word ultimatum caused an immediate stir in the chamber. Species didn't give ultimatums to the Galactic Council. The Council gave ultimatums to species. Earth formally requests that the Council acknowledge the threat in the Theta Serpentis sector and commit to a joint investigation with full military escort. If the Council refuses, Earth will conduct its own investigation with its own resources. Korthax actually laughed. It was a booming sound that echoed through the chamber. Other delegates joined in. The Thessian made that sighing gesture again, but this time Elena's translator interpreted it as amusement. mixed with pity. Ambassador Voss, Korthak said, still chuckling. Humanity is in no position to make demands of this council. You have been members for barely 6 decades. Your territory consists of one heavily populated system and 17 small colonies. Your military consists of vessels that are, to be frank, primitive by galactic standards. Your technology is centuries behind the established species. And yet you stand here and issue an ultimatum? He leaned forward, his forearms folding in front of his massive chest. We have seen this before, you understand. Young species full of vigor and confidence who believe they can simply demand their way through galactic politics. They all learn the same lesson eventually. The galaxy is vast and humanity is very, very small. Elena's jaw clenched. She wanted to scream at them, to make them understand the weight of what they were dismissing. But she was a diplomat. She had a job to do. The United Earth government wanted me to ensure the Council fully understands our position, she said quietly. We have tried cooperation. We have tried patience. We have tried working within the established systems, but our people are dying, and the Council refuses to act. So we will act. She touched a control on her wrist and a holographic display appeared above the speaker's platform. It showed a fleet of ships, their designs sleek and modern by human standards, assembled in formation around Earth. This is the 9th expedition, Elena continued. The UESN Indomitable and her escort fleet. 50,000 personnel, our most advanced vessels, equipped with everything we've learned in 60 years of galactic membership. Admiral James Chen will lead the expedition into the Theta Serpentis sector. They will find out what happened to our missing people. They will identify the threat, and they will return with answers. She looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of as many delegates as she could. I am asking you one final time for Council support. Send observers, send advisors, send military escorts. Help us understand what's happening in that sector before more lives are lost. The silence that followed was heavy. Elena could hear her own heartbeat in her ears. For a moment she thought perhaps her words had reached them. Perhaps the sheer weight of human determination had made an impression. Then Korthak spoke again. The Council will not commit resources to this endeavor. If humanity wishes to waste its own resources and personnel investigating spatial anomalies, that is your choice. But do not expect the Council to support such foolishness. This session is concluded. The gavel came down, a sound like thunder in the vast chamber. Delegates began to file out, their conversations already moving on to other topics. Humanity's ultimatum, humanity's missing people, humanity's desperate plea for help. All of it dismissed and forgotten in moments. Elena stood at the speaker's platform for a long time after the chamber emptied. She stared up at the stars through the transparent dome and wondered how many of them looked down on worlds where people had learned the same hard lesson, that to the ancient powers of the galaxy, young species were disposable. Their lives were acceptable losses. Their grief was background noise. She finally left the chamber and returned to the human embassy section of the station. Her staff was waiting for her, their faces grim. They had watched the session. They knew how it had gone. Send the message to Admiral Chen, Elena said quietly. Tell him the Council refused. He's authorized to proceed. 3 weeks later, the message came through. It was brief. Just a few words transmitted via quantum relay from the Theta Serpentis sector. Entering the target zone. Beginning investigation. Chen out. Then nothing. Silence. The quantum relay remained open, the connection maintained, but no further messages came through. Hours passed, then days. Earth sent repeated hails, desperate requests for status updates, anything. The silence continued. On the 5th day, Elena stood in the communications center of the Earth Embassy, staring at the display screen that showed nothing but static. Around her, technicians worked frantically, checking systems, running diagnostics, trying to find any explanation for the blackout. Ma'am, one of the technicians said, her voice shaking. We're not detecting any damage to the relay system. The connection is open and functional. They're just not transmitting. Could they be in some kind of interference field? Elena asked, though she already knew the answer. We'd still detect carrier signals. Background radiation. Something. This is complete silence. It's like... The technician paused, swallowing hard. It's like there's nothing there to transmit. Elena closed her eyes. 50,000 people. Admiral Chen and his entire fleet. The best humanity had to offer. Sent into the dark to find answers. Gone. Just like the 8 expeditions before them. The news reached Earth within hours. It spread through the human colonies within days. The 9th expedition had vanished. The Council's promises of spatial anomalies rang hollow now. This wasn't bad luck or navigational errors or the dangers of space exploration. This was a pattern. This was deliberate, and the Galactic Council had known, had been warned, had been given the chance to act, and had chosen to do nothing. In the United Earth Strategic Command Center in Geneva, Director Sarah Okonkwo watched the reports come in from across human space. Protests outside Council embassies, calls for withdrawal from galactic treaties, demands for answers, for action, for justice. She looked at her assembled advisors, men and women who represented every branch of Earth's government and military. They all knew what she was about to say. They had all been thinking the same thing since the news broke. Recall all human ambassadors from Council space, Director Okonkwo said. Effective immediately, Earth withdraws from all Galactic Council treaties and agreements. We will conduct our own investigation, make our own decisions, and protect our own people. She paused, looking each advisor in the eye. And if we find out what happened to our expeditions, if we find out who or what is responsible, her voice dropped to a whisper that somehow carried more weight than a shout. Then God help them, because we won't. The orders went out across the quantum network. Within 24 hours, every human ambassador, every human delegate, every human observer in Council space received the same message. Come home. Humanity's brief partnership with the galactic community was over. The galaxy barely noticed. After all, what could one young species do? They were small, primitive, insignificant. The galaxy would learn soon enough how wrong that assessment was. The news displays in Times Square had been converted to show a single image for 3 days straight. It was a photograph taken from the observation deck of the UESN Indomitable, just before the fleet departed Earth. 50,000 faces, some smiling, some serious, all united in purpose. Now that photograph was displayed on screens across every human world, in every colony, in every station and outpost humanity had established among the stars. Beneath the image, a simple caption. They trusted us to bring them home. Maria Santos stood in her apartment in New York, staring at that display through her window. Her brother's face was somewhere in that crowd. Lieutenant Carlos Santos, engineering specialist, 26 years old, always joking that he'd signed up for the boring job of keeping the engines running. He had sent her a message before the fleet departed. Just a short video saying he'd bring her back something interesting from the Theta Serpentis sector. Maybe a rock with weird crystals. Maybe a cool alien plant if they found any planets worth landing on. That message was the last time she heard his voice. Maria wasn't alone in her grief. Across Earth and throughout the 17 human colonies, hundreds of thousands of families were experiencing the same crushing weight. Parents who had lost children. Children who had lost parents. Spouses, siblings, friends, all gone into the darkness, swallowed by something the Galactic Council insisted didn't exist. But grief was transforming into something else. Something harder and colder than sorrow. The protests had started immediately after the news broke. Outside the Galactic Council embassy in Geneva, thousands of people gathered, their anger focused and burning bright. They held signs demanding answers, demanding action, demanding justice for the lost expeditions. Similar protests erupted at every council facility on Earth and in the colonies. The council representatives responded with carefully worded statements about the unfortunate nature of space exploration and the continued commitment to investigating the matter through proper channels. The words felt like ashes in the mouths of grieving families. Director Sarah Okonkwo hadn't slept in 4 days. She sat in the emergency strategic session in the underground command center beneath Geneva, surrounded by holographic displays showing real-time data from across human space. Military commanders, colonial governors, intelligence directors, scientific advisors, all of them connected via secured quantum channels, their faces grim and determined. The intelligence came through an hour ago, said General Marcus Webb, head of Earth's Military Intelligence Division. He brought up a document on the central display. This is a report from our deep cover operatives in Council space. It's preliminary, but the implications are significant. The document showed communications between various Council member species, messages flagged by human intelligence algorithms as potentially relevant to the disappearances. As the assembled leaders read through the intercepted communications, the temperature in the room seemed to drop. They knew, said Governor Chen of the Mars colony, her voice tight with barely controlled rage. Governor Chen's nephew had been aboard the Indomitable. These messages date back months before we sent the first expedition. The Council had intelligence suggesting a hostile presence in that sector. Not just intelligence, General Webb added. Confirmed reports from other species who had lost ships in the same region. The Council classified all of it, buried it in layers of bureaucratic protocols, and told member species that the area was simply experiencing spatial anomalies. Why? Asked Admiral Catherine Rodriguez, commander of the Earth Defense Fleet. Why would they lie about something like this? Because acknowledging the threat would require them to do something about it, Director Okonkwo said quietly. It would require Council resources, Council military action, Council commitment. And we're talking about an area of space on the outer rim, far from Council core worlds. They made a calculated decision that the threat wasn't worth addressing. And when we sent our people to investigate, they let them go, knowing they were likely heading into danger, Governor Chen said. They let 50,000 human lives walk into a trap, because it was easier than admitting the truth. The silence that followed was absolute. In that moment, something fundamental shifted in the collective consciousness of humanity's leadership. They had joined the Galactic Council in good faith, believing in the ideals of cooperation and shared knowledge that the Council proclaimed. They had accepted their place as junior members, understanding they had much to learn from older civilizations. But this was betrayal. This was a choice made by comfortable ancient species who had decided that human lives were acceptable losses. Director Okonkwo stood, her movement drawing every eye in the virtual conference room. I'm calling for a vote, she said. Complete withdrawal from all Galactic Council treaties and agreements. Recall of all human personnel from Council space. Immediate cessation of all trade and diplomatic relations. They'll interpret that as a hostile act, warned Ambassador Voss, who had joined the meeting from the Council station. They'll see it as humanity throwing a tantrum. Let them, Okonkwo replied. We've tried cooperation. We've tried working within their systems. Our reward for that faith was watching our people disappear while they lied to our faces. I'm done asking permission from species who view us as expendable. The vote was unanimous. Within 6 hours, the orders went out across the quantum network. Human ambassadors began packing their offices. Human trade delegations boarded ships for home. Human students at Council educational institutions withdrew from their programs. And quietly, without fanfare or announcement, every human observation post, listening station, and intelligence operation in Council space began downloading everything they could access. Ship movements, military deployments, technological specifications, trade routes, anything that might prove useful. If humanity was leaving the Council's fold, they were taking every scrap of information they could carry. The Council barely noticed at first. Humanity's withdrawal from a few committees and trade agreements seemed like exactly what Korthax had predicted. A young species having an emotional reaction to circumstances they didn't fully understand. The ancient powers of the galaxy had seen countless species join and leave various agreements over the centuries. Humanity would be back once they realized how dependent they were on Council infrastructure and knowledge. They had no idea what was actually happening in human space. In Earth's orbital shipyards, the transformation began immediately. Civilian construction projects were put on indefinite hold. Every berth, every construction facility, every resource allocation was redirected to a single purpose: military production. The designs had been prepared months ago, actually. Earth's military planners were not fools. They had studied galactic history, analyzed the conflicts between Council species, examined the technologies and tactics that made some species dominant and others subordinate. They had built contingency plans for scenarios most hoped would never come to pass. Now those plans were activated. The shipyards that had been building colony vessels began producing warships instead. The manufacturing facilities that made civilian electronics switched to weapon systems. The research laboratories that had been working on improved agriculture for colony worlds pivoted to military applications of their discoveries. On Mars, in the vast underground factories built into the ancient lava tubes, production lines that made construction equipment for colony expansion retooled for military vehicles and weapons. The asteroid mining operations in the belt, which had been extracting resources for civilian use, began prioritizing metals and materials needed for military production. In the outer colonies, where humans had struggled to establish themselves on barely habitable worlds, militia forces were federalized into proper military units. Young men and women who had signed up to defend their small communities from the occasional pirate or smuggler suddenly found themselves training for real war. The Council intelligence services did notice the increased activity. Reports filtered back to various military commands and strategic planning departments. But the interpretations were dismissive. Humanity was obviously grieving, processing their loss through action. They were building up their military as a psychological response to feeling helpless. It was classic behavior for a young species experiencing trauma. The reports noted that human shipyard activity had increased by 300%. They noted that human military recruitment had surged. They noted that civilian research programs had been militarized. But the conclusions drawn from these facts were comfortable and reassuring. Humanity was posturing, making themselves feel strong because they felt weak. No one in Council intelligence considered the possibility that humanity was actually preparing for war. After all, what could they realistically accomplish? They were centuries behind in technology. Their territory was tiny. Their population was insignificant compared to major Council species. What the Council intelligence analysts failed to understand was that humanity had something most Council species had lost over their long, comfortable civilizations: the memory of total war. The Galactic Council had existed for thousands of years in relative peace. Conflicts between member species were handled through diplomatic channels, economic pressure, and carefully controlled proxy conflicts. Real war, the kind that demanded every resource and every citizen's commitment, was something from ancient history for most Council species. But humanity remembered. They remembered what it meant to mobilize an entire civilization for survival. They remembered the factory workers and the engineers and the scientists all focused on a single goal. They remembered what desperation could accomplish when guided by determination. Dr. Elizabeth Park stood in her laboratory at the Stanford Orbital Research Facility, looking at the device her team had just completed. It was a quantum disruption field generator, based on principles humanity had learned from studying Council technology. But where Council species used quantum effects for communication and scanning, humanity had weaponized it. "The simulations are conclusive," Dr. Park said to the military liaison assigned to her project. "This will disrupt quantum-entangled systems within a radius of 10,000 kilometers. Communications, targeting systems, shield generators, anything that relies on quantum effects will fail. What about our own systems?" The liaison asked. "We've developed hardening protocols. Our ships will need to be specifically equipped to operate in disruption fields, but it's doable. The key advantage is that Council species have built their entire technological infrastructure around quantum systems. They've had thousands of years to optimize those systems, but that optimization has made them dependent. Take away the quantum effects and their superior technology becomes a liability." It was one discovery among thousands. Across human space, researchers were working on similar projects. Ways to counter Council advantages, ways to turn humanity's primitive status into a strategic asset, ways to fight and win against civilizations that thought themselves untouchable. 6 months after Earth's withdrawal from the Galactic Council, Director Okonkwo received a report from the Military Logistics Division. It was simple, just a few lines of data, but it made her pause and read it 3 times to be sure she understood. Human military shipyard production, 847% increase over pre-crisis levels. Active military personnel, 312% increase. Military research programs, 2,156 active projects, up from 340. Resource allocation to military purposes, 68% of total human economic output. Those numbers would have been impossible for a Council species. They represented a level of social mobilization and economic transformation that ancient civilizations couldn't achieve without tearing themselves apart. But humanity wasn't an ancient civilization. They were young, adaptable, and they remembered how to focus their entire society on a single purpose. Okonkwo closed the report and looked out at Earth below, the blue marble that had given birth to a species now spreading across the stars. She thought about the 50,000 lives lost on the Indomitable. She thought about the 30,000 who had vanished in the 8 expeditions before it. "We're coming," she whispered to the void. "Whatever took you, whatever the Council is hiding, we're coming." And we won't be asking permission. In council space, the ancient powers continued with their routines, comfortable in their dominance, secure in their superiority. They had forgotten what it meant to face a species that had nothing left to lose and everything to prove. They would remember soon enough. Dr. Marcus Webb had not left the research station in 4 months. His colleagues were worried about him. They brought him food, which he ate absently while staring at displays. They suggested he take a break, go home to Earth for a few weeks, see his family. He refused every time. Marcus couldn't leave. His sister had been on the Indomitable. Lieutenant Sarah Webb, communications specialist, 32 years old. 2 kids back on Earth who asked their Uncle Marcus every week when Mommy was coming home. He didn't know what to tell them. He didn't know what to tell himself, so he searched. Day and night, Marcus sat at his station in the deep space monitoring facility humanity had built on the edge of their territory. The station was officially a research outpost, designed to study the background radiation and cosmic phenomena of deep space. But since the 9th expedition vanished, it had been repurposed. Now it listened to the void, hunting for any whisper, any trace of the lost ships. The equipment was sophisticated, at least by human standards. Quantum receivers that could detect the faintest communications across vast distances. Gravitational sensors that could pick up the ripples caused by ships transitioning through hyperspace. Electromagnetic arrays that scanned every frequency humans knew about, and quite a few they had learned from Council technology. Most of what they detected was noise. The universe was loud when you knew how to listen. Stars screaming radiation into space, black holes devouring matter, cosmic strings vibrating with energies that could tear planets apart, and underneath all of it, the background whisper of reality itself, the quantum foam that made up the fabric of space and time. Marcus had learned to filter out the noise. He had spent years working on signal processing before the crisis, developing algorithms that could find patterns in apparent chaos. Now he used those skills to hunt for ghosts. The other researchers thought he was wasting his time. The expeditions were gone. Whatever had taken them had left no trace. The most likely scenario was that they had encountered some kind of weapon or phenomenon that destroyed ships so completely that not even debris remained. It was tragic, but there was nothing to be found. Marcus refused to believe that. 9 expeditions couldn't just disappear. Something had happened to them. Something had taken them. And if there was anything left, any signal, any trace, any whisper from the dead, he would find it. It was 0347 hours station time when the alarm went off. Marcus had been dozing at his station, his head resting on his arms, dreaming about Sarah laughing at one of his terrible jokes. The sound jerked him awake, his heart hammering as he tried to focus on the displays. At first, he thought it was another false alarm. The system had triggered dozens of times over the past months, usually from some cosmic burp or equipment glitch. But as Marcus pulled up the analysis, his breath caught in his throat. The signal was real. Faint, incredibly faint, but definitely artificial. It was coded in an old emergency protocol, the kind of thing ships would use if their main communications were down and they were trying to send a message with whatever system still functioned, and it was coming from the Theta Serpentis sector. Marcus's hand shook as he worked to clean up the signal. The data was fragmented, corrupted by distance and time and interference. But slowly, piece by piece, he reconstructed it. When he finally saw the source identifier, he had to grip the edge of his console to keep from falling out of his chair. UESN Pathfinder, the flagship of the 7th expedition. Lost 3 years ago. Oh God, Marcus whispered. Oh God, they're still out there. He immediately triggered a priority alert, connecting to Earth's Strategic Command and every relevant military and intelligence facility in human space. Within minutes, his station was flooded with connection requests. Director Okonkwo herself appeared on his main display, her face drawn with exhaustion and hope. "Dr. Webb," she said. "Report." "I've detected a signal from the 7th expedition," Marcus said, speaking quickly, professionally, even as his heart tried to beat its way out of his chest. "It's encoded in Emergency Protocol 77 Alpha, which suggests main systems were down or compromised. The signal is incredibly degraded, but I've been working on reconstruction." "Can you tell what the message says?" Okonkwo asked. "Working on it now. Give me a few minutes." Those few minutes stretched into an hour as Marcus ran every decryption and reconstruction algorithm he knew. Other experts joined the effort remotely, their systems linking with his to share processing power. Slowly, Painfully, the message began to emerge from the noise. What they found made Marcus's blood run cold. The message was a data dump, clearly compiled in desperation. There were sensor logs, combat records, personal journal entries, and at the beginning, a video message from the Pathfinder's captain. Captain Richard Torres appeared on the screen, his face haggard, blood streaking the side of his head. Behind him, Marcus could see the Pathfinder's bridge in chaos, consoles sparking, crew members shouting orders, alarms blaring. "This message is being stored in a quantum-entangled emergency buoy," Torres said, his voice strained. "If you're receiving this, it means the Pathfinder is gone. It means we failed. But at least you'll know what happened. At least you'll know the truth." Torres looked off camera for a moment, listening to something Marcus couldn't hear. Then he looked back, and his expression was one of pure rage. "It's not spatial anomalies. That's what the Council told us. What they told all the expeditions. But they lied. They knew what was out here. They've known for centuries." The image shifted, showing sensor data from the Pathfinder's final hours. Marcus saw something that made his skin crawl. Ships. Dozens of them appearing around the human vessels like predators surrounding prey. But these weren't any ship design Marcus recognized. They were organic, pulsing things that looked more like they'd been grown than built. "They call themselves the Devourers," Torres continued. "At least that's the closest translation. They're a biological species that harvests other civilizations. They don't trade, they don't negotiate, they don't coexist. They consume. They break down ships, technology, biological matter, everything, and incorporate it into themselves." The sensor data showed the battle that followed. The human ships had fought desperately, their weapons tearing into the organic vessels. But for every Devourer ship they destroyed, 2 more appeared. The attackers were relentless, coordinated, and utterly without mercy. "We discovered something worse," Torres said. "Much worse. Look at these readings." The display showed another set of ships on the edge of the battle. These were different, clearly artificial, built with advanced technology. Marcus recognized some of the designs. They were Council ships. Vraxian cruisers, Thessian science vessels, Karathi destroyers. "They were watching," Torres said, his voice breaking. "Council ships were in the system, observing the battle. We sent them distress calls. We begged for help. They didn't respond. They just watched as the Devourers tore us apart." Marcus felt sick. The implications were staggering. The Council hadn't just known about the Devourers. They had been watching as human ships were destroyed. The video continued. Torres explained what the Pathfinder's crew had discovered through desperate investigation during their final hours. The Council had encountered the Devourers hundreds of years ago. The creatures had devastated several Council species, consuming entire colonies before anyone understood the threat. But fighting the Devourers required commitment. It required sacrifice. It required sending fleets into dangerous space to hunt down and destroy a relentless biological threat that could adapt and evolve in response to weapons used against it. The Council had made a different choice. They had made a deal. "They feed them," Torres said, his face a mask of disgust and horror. "The Council feeds the Devourers. They direct them toward younger species on the outer rim, species that don't have the power to protest or investigate. They sacrifice the weak to protect the strong." The data logs supported the claim. The Pathfinder's crew had found records in a damaged Devourer ship, biological data storage that contained information about previous hunts. Species Marcus had never heard of, civilizations the Council had allowed to be consumed. And mixed in with the alien data were Council communications, coordinates and schedules, information about ship movements in vulnerable areas. The expeditions hadn't stumbled into danger. They had been led there. Sacrificial lambs sent to feed a monster so the monster wouldn't hunt closer to Council core worlds. "We managed to damage their coordination systems," Torres said. "Bought ourselves a few hours. Used that time to compile everything we found and store it in this buoy. We're hiding it in a nebula at these coordinates." A string of numbers appeared on the screen. "It's quantum entangled with a receiver in human space. If anyone finds this, if anyone receives this signal, please tell Earth. Tell them what the Council did. Tell them why we died." Torres looked off camera again. Marcus could hear weapons fire now, alarms screaming. The captain looked back one last time. "We're going to keep fighting as long as we can. Maybe we'll take enough of these bastards with us to make a difference. Tell my wife I love her. Tell Earth," his voice caught. "Tell Earth that we didn't die for nothing. Tell them to make it mean something." The video cut off. The rest of the data dump was combat logs, sensor readings, tactical analysis, everything the Pathfinder's crew had learned about the Devourers before they died. How they fought, how they communicated, how they bred and spread. It was information purchased with blood and life. Marcus sat back in his chair, his mind reeling. Around him, the other researchers were silent, staring at their screens. Across the quantum connection, Director Okonkwo's face was pale. "Get me the Security Council," she said quietly. "All of them. Immediately." Within 6 hours, every member of Earth's Security Council was assembled in the Geneva Command Center. They watched the video from Captain Torres. They reviewed the data. They examined the evidence, checking and rechecking, hoping to find some flaw, some indication that this was wrong or mistaken. But it was all real. The dates matched. The ship movements matched. The disappearances of other species in the same regions matched. The Council had been feeding younger civilizations to the Devourers for centuries, a secret policy of managed sacrifice to protect their own comfortable existence. When the final report finished, the Council chamber was silent. These were people who had spent their careers making difficult decisions, weighing costs and benefits, accepting that sometimes people died to achieve necessary goals. But this was different. This was systematic betrayal on a scale almost impossible to comprehend. General Rodriguez spoke first. "How many?" she asked quietly. "How many species has the Council sacrificed?" An intelligence analyst brought up a display. "Based on the Devourer records, at least 37 species over the past 500 years. Possibly more. The records are incomplete. 37 civilizations," Governor Chen said. "Millions, possibly billions of lives. Also, the Council wouldn't have to fight their own battles." Director Okonkwo stood, walking to the observation window that looked out over Geneva. The city lights sparkled in the night. Humanity's achievement in creating beauty and civilization on their homeworld. She thought about all those other species, other civilizations that had probably looked at their own cities and felt the same pride, the same hope for the future. All of them fed to monsters by species that couldn't be bothered to protect them. "We're not going to let this stand," Okonkwo said. She turned to face the Council. "We're going to find the Devourers. We're going to find every last nest, every breeding ground, every hunting territory, and we're going to end them. The Council will oppose us," Ambassador Voss warned. "They've been hiding this for centuries. They won't want it exposed." "Let them try to stop us," Okonkwo replied. "We're not asking permission anymore. We're not negotiating. We're not playing by their rules. The Council had their chance to do the right thing. They chose comfort and survival at the cost of innocent lives." She looked at each Council member in turn. "This isn't just about revenge for our lost people, though God knows we're owed that. This is about making sure no other species suffers the same fate. This is about showing the galaxy that humanity won't tolerate evil, even when that evil wears the mask of authority. We'll need significant military resources," General Rodriguez said. "This won't be a simple operation." "Then we commit everything," Okonkwo said. "We've spent 6 months building up our military. Now we're going to use it. Authorize Operation Reckoning. Full mobilization. Every ship, every resource, every bit of intelligence we've gathered. We're going to war." The vote was unanimous. Messages went out across human space within the hour. Military commanders received their orders. Ship captains prepared their vessels. Marines checked their equipment. Scientists finalized weapons and systems designed specifically to fight biological threats. Humanity had spent 6 months preparing for war, though most people hadn't understood what kind of war it would be. Now they knew. Now they understood why their comfortable lives had been disrupted, why so much had been sacrificed to military production, why they had been asked to give up so much. Because somewhere out in the darkness monsters were hunting, and the galaxy's supposed protectors had been helping them choose their prey. That ended now. Humanity was going to remind the galaxy of something the ancient powers had forgotten. That evil unchecked would spread. That comfort purchased with others' suffering was no comfort at all. And that sometimes the young and angry could accomplish what the old and comfortable never would. The hunt was about to begin. The Devourer hunting pack had been in the Theta Serpentis sector for 6 standard cycles. They had claimed 17 systems in that time, consuming 3 colonies from younger species who ventured too close to their territory. The food was easy here. The Council did good work directing prey to them. The lead organism, a massive creature nearly 2 kilometers long that had absorbed the consciousness of 100 smaller units, drifted in the darkness between stars. Its biological sensors detected the quantum distortions of approaching ships. More prey, most likely. Perhaps another gift from the Council, another young species sent to investigate disappearances. The hunting pack prepared. 73 major organisms and hundreds of smaller support units moved into position, their organic systems pulsing with anticipation. They had perfected this ambush over centuries. Wait until the prey ships were deep in the sector, far from help, then surround and overwhelm them. Quick consumption meant less chance the prey could send warnings. The quantum signatures grew stronger. The prey was approaching. The lead organism sent chemical signals through the void, tasting the approaching energy signatures to determine how many ships it would need to commit. Then the signatures resolved, and for the first time in its long existence, the lead organism experienced something like fear. This wasn't a small expedition. This wasn't a handful of primitive vessels stumbling into a trap. This was a fleet, a vast, coordinated fleet of 200 warships, their energy signatures bright and focused and aggressive. The lead organism tried to send a retreat signal, but it was already too late. The human armada emerged from hyperspace in perfect formation. Captain Maria Chen stood on the bridge of the UESN Retribution, her eyes locked on the tactical display showing dozens of devourer organisms surrounding her fleet. "All ships," she said calmly. "Weapons free. Execute Protocol Omega." The battle began instantly. Human ships didn't wait to be attacked. They didn't attempt communication or warning. They simply opened fire with every weapon system they had spent 6 months developing, specifically for this moment. Quantum disruption fields burst into existence across the battlefield, washing over the devourer swarm like invisible fire. The organic ship's biological systems, which relied on quantum effects for coordination and communication, suddenly found themselves blind and confused. The hive mind that made the devourers so deadly began to fragment. Then came the kinetic strikes. Magnetic accelerators fired projectiles at relativistic speeds, each one carrying the kinetic energy of a small nuclear weapon. The projectiles punched through organic armor that had evolved to resist energy weapons, creating massive wounds that vented atmosphere and biological fluid into space. Behind the kinetic barrage came the nanite swarms. Humanity had studied the biological data recovered from Captain Torres's message, learning how the Devourer's organic systems functioned. The nanites were designed to be aggressive, programmed to target specific biological markers and tear apart cellular structures. When they made contact with Devourer ships, they began consuming and replicating, turning the hunter's own biological nature against them. Captain Chen watched the tactical display as the first wave of attacks hit home. Devourer organisms were dying, their massive forms rupturing and breaking apart. But she knew this was just the beginning. Second wave. "Execute," she ordered. The human fleet broke formation, ships peeling off in coordinated attack patterns that had been practiced hundreds of times in simulation. This wasn't the kind of fleet engagement the Council species preferred, where massive ships traded energy weapon fire in stately formations. This was chaos warfare, fast and brutal and overwhelming. The Devourers tried to adapt. They were survivors, creatures that had hunted and consumed for centuries, but they had never faced an enemy like this. Every advantage they had developed, their biological resilience, their hive coordination, their ability to adapt to new threats, had been countered by weapons specifically designed to target those strengths. And humanity wasn't fighting alone. The fleet included 17 ships crewed by survivors from other species the Council had fed to the Devourers. Refugees and volunteers who had lost their homeworlds to the biological horrors now fought alongside humans, their grief transformed into cold determination. The battle lasted 6 hours. When it ended, the Theta Serpentis sector was littered with the torn remains of devourer organisms. Of the 73 major units that had been hunting in the sector, none survived. The human fleet had taken damage, 3 ships destroyed, 7 more badly damaged, 2,000 casualties, but they had won decisively. Captain Chen stood on the bridge, looking at the tactical display showing the aftermath. Her hands were shaking slightly. She had joined the military because of her father, Admiral James Chen, who had commanded the 9th Expedition. She had spent 6 months preparing for this moment, training and planning and studying how to kill the things that had killed him. "Captain," her tactical officer said quietly, "we're detecting an anomaly. One of the larger devourer organisms appears to have survived." Chen immediately focused. "Location? Drifting near the third planet. It's badly damaged, but still showing life signs." "Prepare boarding parties," Chen ordered. "I want that thing taken intact." The assault shuttles launched 30 minutes later, carrying human Marines in full combat gear. They approached the wounded devourer organism cautiously, their weapons ready for any resistance. But the creature was dying, its biological systems failing after being torn apart by human weapons. The Marines breached the organic hull and entered a nightmare landscape of pulsing tissue and biological machinery. They moved through corridors that seemed grown rather than built, following scanner readings toward what appeared to be the organism's central control system. What they found there would change everything. The Devourer's biological data storage was still intact, and when the Marines accessed it, they discovered something that made the revelation about the Council's complicity even worse. The storage contained detailed records, centuries of hunts carefully documented, but mixed in with the biological data were communications logs, coordination protocols, and schedules. The Council hadn't just been directing young species toward the Devourers. They had been providing detailed intelligence about those species. Ship designs, weapon capabilities, defensive strategies, everything a predator would need to ensure successful hunts. And there was more. The records showed that Council species had been harvesting Devourer biological material for their own use. The organic armor, the adaptive properties, the quantum biological systems, Council researchers had been secretly incorporating Devourer technology into their own ships and weapons while publicly claiming ignorance. They didn't just allow this to happen, Marine Lieutenant Sarah Morrison said, staring at the data scrolling across her scanner. They profited from it. Captain Chen reviewed the data when the Marines returned to the Retribution. She felt sick. The betrayal went deeper than anyone had imagined. The Council hadn't made a devil's bargain out of fear or desperation. They had created a system, a business arrangement where younger species were sacrificed for Council benefit. "Send this data to Earth immediately," Chen ordered. "Priority Alpha. Director Okonkwo needs to see this." But before they could transmit, the Retribution sensors detected something new. More ships were approaching the sector. "A lot of ships. Council vessels," the sensor officer reported. "Vraxian Battle Group, 47 ships. They're broadcasting warnings demanding we withdraw immediately." Chen felt a cold smile cross her face. "Open a channel." The view screen flickered to life, showing a Vraxian commander. She recognized him from intelligence briefings. Korthax's son, Vorthak, a career military officer who had been commanding Council peacekeeping forces for decades. "Human vessels," Vorthak said, his voice carrying the same dismissive tone his father used. "You have violated Council protocols by entering this sector and engaging in unauthorized military action. You will power down your weapons and prepare to be escorted back to human space." "We're not going anywhere," Chen replied. "We came here to deal with the Devourers. That's what we're doing." "The situation in this sector is a Council matter," Vorthak said. "You have no authority." "We have all the authority we need," Chen interrupted. "We know what you've been doing. We know about the arrangement. We know you've been feeding young species to these things for centuries, and we have proof." Vorthak's expression shifted, becoming guarded. "I don't know what you think you've discovered, but—" "We recovered Devourer records," Chen said. "Complete records including all Council communications. Ship movements, intelligence sharing, biological material exchanges. We know everything." There was a long pause. Chen could almost see the calculations happening behind Vorthak's eyes. The Council's secret was out. The question now was what they would do about it. "Captain Chen," Vorthak said carefully, "you must understand the Devourers are a complex threat. The Council has been managing them for centuries, preventing them from becoming a larger danger to galactic civilization. Sometimes difficult choices must be made for the greater good." "Difficult choices," Chen repeated. Her voice was ice. "Is that what you call sacrificing 37 species? Millions of lives? My father and 50,000 human personnel on the Indomitable? The losses were regrettable, but—" "Shut up," Chen said. The Vraxian commander actually recoiled, shocked that a human would dare speak to him that way. "You don't get to justify this. You don't get to explain. You made your choice. You chose comfort and profit over the lives of innocent people. Now we're making our choice, and what choice is that? Vorthak asked. We're going to exterminate every last devourer in this region of space, Chen said. Every nest, every breeding ground, every hunting pack. We're going to burn them out of existence. And if you try to stop us, we'll go through you to do it. Vorthak's forearms folded across his chest in what Chen's cultural database identified as an aggressive posture. You're threatening Council forces? Do you understand the consequences of such actions? I understand that you've been hiding behind bureaucracy and ancient laws while people died, Chen replied. I understand that you're more concerned about maintaining your comfortable existence than actually protecting anyone. And I understand that you're not going to stop us. She gestured to her tactical officer, and the display behind her changed, showing the human fleet. But not just the 200 ships that had engaged the Devourers. The display showed something else, something that made Vorthak's eyes widen. 800 additional warships holding position at the edge of the sector. An armada that represented 6 months of humanity's total military production, everything they had built in preparation for this moment. You brought one battle group, Chen said. We brought everything. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to withdraw and let us do what needs to be done, or you're going to try to stop us and learn exactly what humanity is capable of when you threaten our people. The channel went silent for nearly a minute. Chen waited, her hands steady on her command chair, her heart pounding. This was the moment. This was where the Council would either back down or commit to conflict. Finally, Vorthak spoke. I need to consult with my superiors. You have 1 hour, Chen said. After that, we continue operations regardless of your decision. The channel closed. Chen took a deep breath, looking at her bridge crew. They were young, most of them, barely trained compared to Council military standards, but they had something Council forces had lost over their long centuries of dominance. The absolute conviction that they were fighting for something that mattered. All ships maintain combat readiness, Chen ordered. Prepare for full fleet operations. We're going hunting. Across human space, similar confrontations were playing out. Human fleets had simultaneously appeared at 17 different locations, where intelligence suggested devourer presence. At each location, they engaged the biological horrors with overwhelming force, using tactics and weapons specifically designed to counter devourer advantages. And at each location, Council forces arrived to find the battles already over, the devourers dead or dying, and human ships preparing to move to the next target. The galaxy was witnessing something it hadn't seen in centuries. A species willing to fight not for territory or resources, but for the simple principle that some evils must not be tolerated. The devourers had hunted unchecked for centuries, comfortable in the knowledge that the Council would feed them and protect them from consequences. That era was ending. The prey had become the hunters, and they would show no mercy to those who had shown them none. In the command center in Geneva, Director Okonkwo watched the tactical displays showing every human fleet across the sector. The operation was working. The devourers were dying, and the Council was learning that humanity's patience had limits. Director, General Rodriguez said, we're receiving reports that 3 Council species have withdrawn their forces rather than engage our fleets. The Thessians, the Karathi, and surprisingly the Krendel collective. They're seeing the writing on the wall, Okonkwo replied. They know if they fight us, they'll have to explain why. And that will expose the whole rotten system they've been supporting. What about the Vraxians? Vorthak has requested another hour to consult his government. I suspect he's getting rather angry responses to his request for guidance. His father spent years mocking humanity in council chambers. Now he has to explain why a fleet of primitive human ships just defeated the Devourers and is demanding council forces stand down. Okonkwo smiled, though there was no warmth in it. Let them squirm. Let them try to justify what they've done. The galaxy is watching now. The secret is out. And in the darkness of the Theta Serpentis sector, human ships continued their work, methodically hunting down and destroying an evil that had been allowed to exist for far too long. The Galactic Council Station orbited the gas giant Kepler 442b like it had for 3,000 years, a monument to ancient power and established order. Its halls had witnessed the rise and fall of countless civilizations, always under the watchful guidance of the founding species. The chamber where the council met was designed to inspire awe and submission in equal measure, with its soaring ceilings and walls inscribed with the names of every species that had bent knee to council authority. Today, That chamber would witness something new. The human fleet arrived without warning. One moment, the space around the station was clear. The next, 200 warships materialized from hyperspace in perfect formation, their weapons powered but not yet active. The Council's defensive forces scrambled to respond, but they were caught completely off guard. In the 3 months since Operation Reckoning began, the Council had been so focused on trying to contain the damage to their reputation that they had forgotten humanity might actually come for them. Station Control sent out panicked hails, demanding the human fleet identify itself and state its intentions. They received no response. Instead, the human ships simply moved into position, surrounding the station in a sphere of military power that made it clear no ship was leaving without human permission. On the station's command deck, alarms blared. Defense systems powered up, but the commanders quickly realized how meaningless those defenses were. The human fleet wasn't threatening attack. They were already in position to destroy the station if they chose. The defensive weapons were irrelevant. Director Sarah Okonkwo stood in the transport shuttle that carried her from the flagship to the station's docking bay. She wore full combat armor, the kind human Marines used during boarding actions. Behind her stood 20 human Marines in similar gear, their weapons ready, their faces hard and determined. The shuttle docked without requesting permission. When the bay doors opened, station security forces were waiting, their own weapons drawn. For a long moment, the two groups faced each other across the docking bay, and the tension was thick enough to cut. Then Okonkwo walked forward, and the security forces parted before her like water. They had their orders, supposedly. They were supposed to prevent unauthorized personnel from entering the station, but something in the way the humans moved, the absolute conviction in their body language, made resistance seem pointless. Okonkwo and her escort walked through the station's corridors. Personnel fled before them. Doors that should have been locked opened as human cyber warfare specialists, working from the fleet above, systematically took control of the station's systems. By the time Okonkwo reached the council chambers, every security system on the station was under human control. The chamber was full when she arrived. Every council delegate was present, along with military commanders, advisors, and representatives from dozens of species. They had been in emergency session for hours, trying to decide how to respond to humanity's campaign against the Devourers and the revelations about Council complicity. The debate stopped. When the chamber doors opened and Okonkwo walked in, she didn't request permission to speak. She didn't wait to be recognized by the council chair. She simply walked to the center of the chamber, her Marines taking up positions around the perimeter, and looked around at the assembled representatives of galactic power. "We know everything," Okonkwo said. Her voice was calm, conversational, but it carried through the vast chamber with perfect clarity. "We have the Devourer records. We have the communications between Council species and the Devourers. We have the research files showing how you've been harvesting their biological material for your own use. We have the trading schedules showing which species you sacrificed and when. We have everything." She pulled a data module from her armor and placed it on the speaker's platform. With a gesture, she activated it, and holographic displays burst into existence throughout the chamber. The records, everything humanity had discovered, began scrolling across the displays for everyone to see. 37 species, Okonkwo continued. Over 500 years. Millions of lives. All sacrificed so you could maintain your comfortable existence without having to fight your own battles. Korthax rose from his seat, his forearms spread in what might have been a placating gesture. "Director Okonkwo, you must understand." "No." Okonkwo cut him off. "You're going to listen. For once in your long, comfortable life, you're going to shut up and listen to what someone else has to say." The chamber erupted in outrage. Delegates shouted in a dozen languages. How dare a human speak to a council elder that way? This was a violation of every protocol, every tradition. Security forces should be removing her from the chamber. But the security forces didn't move. The station systems didn't respond to council commands. And outside, 200 human warships made it very clear what would happen if anyone tried to forcibly remove the human delegation. Okonkwo waited for the noise to die down. When it finally did, she continued. 9 expeditions, she said. 9 times we sent our people to investigate what was happening in the Theta Serpentis sector. 9 times you lied to us about what they would find. 80,000 human lives, Counselor Korthax. 80,000 people who trusted that the Galactic Council, in its ancient wisdom, was telling the truth about the dangers they faced. She turned slowly, making eye contact with delegates from different species. Some looked away. Others met her gaze with varying degrees of shame or defiance. But you weren't just lying to us, Okonkwo said. The records show at least 12 other species who came to the council with concerns about disappearances in various sectors. Species you also dismissed and directed toward devourer hunting grounds. How many of them know the truth? How many of them are sitting in this chamber right now, wondering if their own people were sacrificed to feed the monsters you were too comfortable to fight? A Thessian delegate rose, their many limbs trembling. If what you say is true, they began, their voice translated into a quavering tone. If the council leadership truly engaged in such actions, then they did so without the knowledge or consent of our people. Then your people should be very interested in these records, Okonkwo replied. She gestured to the holographic displays. We're broadcasting all of this on open channels. Every species in the galaxy can access it. There are no more secrets, no more hidden policies. Everything the council has done is now public knowledge. The implications of that statement hit the chamber like a physical blow. For centuries, the council had operated behind closed doors, making decisions that affected billions without public accountability. The founding species had justified this as necessary for stability, for preventing panic, for maintaining order. Now that curtain had been torn away, and the view behind it was ugly. Korthax's expression had shifted from outrage to something more calculating. What do you want? He asked. You've made your point. You've exposed our failures. But you came here for more than just revelation. What are your demands? The council is dissolved, Okonkwo said simply. Effective immediately. The founding species no longer have the authority to make decisions for the galaxy. The chamber exploded again. This was insanity. The council had existed for thousands of years. It was the foundation of galactic civilization. You couldn't just dissolve it because one young species was angry. You can't do this, a Karathi delegate shouted. You have no authority. No species can unilaterally dissolve the council. You're right, Okonkwo agreed. We can't dissolve the council, but we can make it irrelevant. And we can give every other species in the galaxy the information they need to make their own choices about whether to continue supporting an organization that sacrificed their people for convenience. She pulled up another display, this one showing tactical readouts, human fleets across the galaxy positioned at key locations, the military might that humanity had built in 6 months of focused production. In the past 3 months, we've destroyed every devourer nest we could find, Okonkwo said. 17 major breeding grounds, 43 hunting packs, hundreds of smaller clusters. The threat you claimed was too dangerous to face directly has been largely eliminated by a species you considered primitive and insignificant. She let that sink in for a moment. The council species had spent centuries telling themselves and others that they were the galaxy's protectors, the wise guardians of peace and order. But humanity, with a fraction of their resources and experience, had accomplished what the council had refused to even attempt. We're proposing a new system, Okonkwo continued. A coalition of willing species where decisions are made by consensus rather than decree. Where young species have the same voice as old ones. Where military protection is provided to all members, not just those convenient to defend. And where humanity serves as military guarantor, ensuring that no species is ever again sacrificed for another's comfort. You're proposing yourselves as the new dominant power, Korthax said. How is that different from what the council has been? Because we're not asking for trust based on ancient authority, Okonkwo replied. We're offering a choice. Every species can decide whether to join the new coalition or remain independent. There will be no threats, no economic pressure, no forced membership. And any species that participated in the devourer arrangement will pay reparations to the families of those who were lost. She looked directly at Korthax. That includes the Vraxian Empire. That includes the Thessian Collective. That includes every founding species that knew what was happening and chose to benefit from it rather than stop it. The Karathi delegate stood. And if we refuse? If we reject your demands and choose to maintain the council as it has always been? Captain Maria Chen stepped forward from where she had been standing with the Marine escort. Then you'll discover what happens when you ignore humanity's warnings, she said. We didn't come here with just 200 ships, Counselor. The tactical display shifted, expanding to show the full scope of human military deployment. 800 ships within immediate jump distance of the Council station. Another 1,000 in various stages of construction or deployment across human space. Shipyards that showed no sign of slowing production. We're not the weak species you dismissed anymore, Chen continued. We've spent 6 months building the capacity to wage total war. Every human system, every colony, every outpost has been transformed into military production. We're not going back to being the victims you can sacrifice. This is madness, a delegate from the Krendel Collective said. You're threatening the entire galactic order over millions of lives, Okonkwo interrupted. Over deliberate, calculated murder spread across centuries. Over a system so corrupt that the supposed guardians of civilization were feeding sentient beings to biological horrors. If that's the galactic order you want to defend, Counselor, then yes, we're threatening it. We're going to tear it down and build something better. She looked around the chamber one more time. Here are the terms. The Council dissolves within 30 days. A new constitutional convention will be held, with representation from every spacefaring species. Any species that participated in the Devourer arrangement will face immediate economic sanctions until reparations are paid. Council military forces will be reorganized under coalition command, with strict oversight to prevent future abuses. And if we refuse? Korthax asked. His voice was quieter now, more measured. He could see the writing on the wall, but his pride demanded he ask the question. Then humanity will withdraw completely from galactic affairs, Okonkwo said. We'll seal our borders, maintain our military, and let the rest of you deal with the consequences of your actions. When the next species comes to you for help, when the next crisis emerges, you'll face it without us, and every species in the galaxy will know that when they needed someone to stand up to evil, it was humans who acted while the ancient powers dithered. She paused. Or worse, we'll start releasing information about other Council secrets. We've had unrestricted access to station systems for the past hour. Our cyber warfare specialists have been very busy. I wonder how many other uncomfortable truths are hiding in Council databases. That threat landed hard. The delegates looked at each other, calculations running behind their eyes. How many other secrets were there? How many other policies had been implemented without public knowledge? How much damage could humanity do if they started systematically exposing Council operations? A younger delegate from a species humanity didn't recognize stood up. I support the human proposal, she said. Her voice was shaking but determined. My people lost a colony ship 20 years ago in the Ardennes sector. The Council told us it was pirates, but now I wonder if it was something else. I want the truth. I want accountability. Another delegate stood, then another. The dam was breaking. Species that had doubts, that had lost people, that had questions about Council decisions, they were speaking up now, emboldened by humanity's example. Korthax watched it happen, his expression unreadable. Finally, he stood and raised one of his forearms in a gesture that humanity's translators interpreted as resignation. The Vraxian Empire will agree to the human terms, he said. Pending review by our government, of course. But speaking as this delegation's representative, I believe we have little choice. He looked at Okonkwo, and there was something almost like respect in his eyes. You've won, Director, not through superior wisdom or ancient authority, but through the simple willingness to do what needed to be done. Perhaps that's a lesson the Council should have learned long ago. Perhaps, Okonkwo agreed, but lessons learned in blood are lessons that stick. Over the next few hours, the delegates debated and discussed and ultimately voted. It wasn't unanimous. Several species objected, claimed humanity was overreaching, predicted disaster. But the majority voted to dissolve the Council and begin the process of creating something new. When the session finally ended, Okonkwo stood on the observation deck of the Council station, looking out at the human fleet holding position around the structure. Captain Chen joined her, standing quietly beside her. We did it, Chen said. We actually did it. We did what was necessary, Okonkwo replied. Now comes the hard part. Building something better. Do you think they'll cooperate? The Council species, I mean. Or will they fight us every step of the way? Some will cooperate. Others will resist. But they'll all remember what happened when they ignored humanity's warnings. They'll remember that we didn't back down. They'll remember that when we said we would do something, we did it. Okonkwo turned to face Chen. Your father would be proud, you know. He went into the dark to find answers. He gave his life trying to protect others. Now we've made that sacrifice mean something. Chen nodded, not trusting herself to speak. The weight of everything they had done, everything they had lost, pressed down on her. 80,000 lives. 9 expeditions. Countless people from other species who had been sacrificed over centuries. What happens now? Chen asked finally. Now we make sure this never happens again, Okonkwo said. We build a system where young species aren't disposable, where asking for help doesn't lead to betrayal, where the powerful protect the weak not because they're forced to, but because it's the right thing to do. She smiled, though it was tired. We teach the galaxy something they forgot. That peace requires the capacity for war. That mercy is only meaningful when you have the power to destroy. That the measure of civilization isn't how comfortable the powerful are, but how protected the vulnerable are. Across the galaxy, the news spread at the speed of light. The council was dissolved. Humanity had exposed centuries of corruption and sacrifice. The devourers were being systematically hunted to extinction. A new order was being born, forged in the fire of human determination and fury. Some species celebrated. Others worried about what this meant for galactic stability. But all of them understood that something fundamental had changed. The old order, where ancient species made decisions for everyone else, was over. A young, angry species had reminded the galaxy of a simple truth. That authority must be earned through action, not claimed through age. That protection means actually protecting people, not sacrificing some to save others. That sometimes the greatest wisdom comes not from experience, but from refusing to accept that evil is inevitable. The Vraxian delegate who had mocked humanity's theatrical posturing found himself facing questions from his own government. How had he missed humanity's determination? How had he so badly misread their willingness to follow through on their ultimatum? But Korthax, for all his faults, understood what had happened. Humanity had done something the council species had forgotten was possible. They had changed the rules of the game by refusing to play by them. In homes across human space, families received notifications that reparations were being paid for their lost loved ones. It couldn't bring back the dead, couldn't heal the wounds, couldn't undo the years of grief, but it was acknowledgement. It was justice of a sort. It was the galaxy finally admitting that human lives mattered. Maria Santos stood in her apartment in New York, holding a letter that had been delivered via official channels. It was from the Vraxian Empire, written in carefully translated English expressing regret for the loss of her brother Carlos. Attached was a significant financial settlement and an official apology. She read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down her face. It wasn't enough. Nothing could be enough. But it was something. It was the galaxy saying that her brother's life had value, that his death had mattered, that the system that had killed him was being dismantled. At the bottom of the letter was a personal note from Captain Maria Chen, who had lost her own father to the devourers. It read simply, "We made them remember. We made them pay. Your brother's sacrifice meant something." Across human space, similar letters were being delivered to hundreds of thousands of families. Each one carried the same message. You were heard. You were seen. Justice has been served. In the Geneva Command Center, Director Okonkwo prepared for the first meeting of the new coalition. Representatives from 47 species had already confirmed attendance. Dozens more were considering joining. The new system was far from perfect. It would face challenges, conflicts, and struggles for years to come. But it would be better than what came before. It would be more just, more accountable, more committed to actually protecting people rather than just maintaining power. And if anyone, any species, any faction, any threat, tried to return to the old ways, tried to treat other species as disposable, tried to hide evil behind bureaucracy and ancient authority, they would face humanity, a species that had learned the hardest way possible, that the galaxy was not kind to the weak, a species that had transformed grief into strength, had turned loss into determination, had built from tragedy a military force that could reshape galactic civilization, a species that would never ever forget what happened when the powerful forgot their responsibilities to the weak. The galaxy had learned a new rule. You could dismiss humanity's warnings. You could mock their ultimatums. You could even make their people disappear. But humanity would always come back, and when they did, they would bring not patience and diplomacy, but justice and consequences. The era of comfortable dominance was over. The era of accountability had begun, and humanity would make sure with every resource they possessed that it would never end.